get like Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I was asking Cassie how many folks were online, and it's only 45. I thought there might be many, many more for walking, coming here today on what could be a pretty interesting wet day. This morning, what we'd like to do is touch on two topics. The first topic is one that has some confusion around it typically, but definitely has a lot of confusion around it right now during the salary exercise. And so we thought the timing might be really good to have a joint team between HR and OEO to talk about promotion, salary increases, the different processes, who owns what piece of it, how does it work, what's the flow chart of it. So handouts in the back, one handout speaks a lot to where to go and what to start in this area. And then the other topic for today is supplemental pay. The new supplemental online, the new online supplemental pay process is live and being used. There have been some about it. Please mute your phone or your audio so that we don't hear you in the. Thank you. Supplemental pay. So what we would like to do this morning is two things. One, share with you that the feedback is being received. It's being gathered by information systems. It's going to be presented to Bob Inmark and Dan Bush for consideration, so know that that's taking place. But then this morning, what we want to do is share the way the process works right now and open it up to any questions that you may have. So two agenda items for the day. First, we'd like to introduce the mighty team of Siobhan Festivan, Becca McCarty, Bridget Hintenberger, and in the back, not presenting today, but key to the presentation today is Emily Rogers. So also want to introduce Emily, who's here. But welcome the three of you up to talk about promotions and salary increases. Come on up.
All right, thanks, Diana. All right, welcome everybody. So we are going to be talking today to kind of give some clarification around what is housed in HR and what is housed in OEO, because I know sometimes that can get kind of crossed in some gray lines. So promotion salary increase process for AP and faculty. So first we're going to give some definitions. I know we have some new liaisons across campus, and just to make sure that when we're all talking on the phone, email, whatever way of communication, that we're all understanding what we're all talking about. The TMS, Talent Management System. This is the online tool. Recruit and hire, we mainly work in two modules. We work in the blue module, which is the hire, and that's going to be OEO. Then we work in the orange module, which is positions, which is HR. And I know that HR works in both blue and orange, but that's predominantly where the two of us or all of us are going to be working. Position description. So this is the detailed qualification requirements and duties. This is what you submit for recruitment, for an AAR, anything like that. It's housed in TMS. That's on the orange side, and then once it goes to position approved, that's when it moves to the blue side and becomes a posting. So that's your position description. It has your required quals, essential job duties, decision making, all of that. An AAR, alternative appointment request. There are several different types. You can have search waivers, which are direct hires, reappointments, title or classification changes with expanded duties. This is also housed in TMS on the blue or the higher side. And the hiring proposal. This is the final process when you're doing a recruitment, when you're doing an AAR, when you're hiring somebody, putting them into a position. This is the final process. And you will upload the signed offer letter in TMS to that as well. Next one, Oracle Action. This is housed in our HR Oracle system. This is usually the last step in the final process of a lot of different processes, especially in the hiring or promotion, but also a lot of things. You go into Oracle, you Zoom, you do the action, you send it through. It's approved through HR, then it's approved through payroll, and then that process is done. SALX, or the Salary Raise Exercise. So this is housed in the HR Oracle system, and this is effective from February to June 30th of every year. And this is for faculty and administrative professionals for the salary increases. And then this is a mouthful. request for individual salary adjustment outside of the annual merit cycle form, or also known as salary adjustment form, off-cycle, or out-of-cycle salary form. So this, where SALX goes from February to June 30th, the off-cycle form goes from July 1 to January 30th. So that's how you do all the salary increases throughout the year. You've got SALX, and then you have the off-cycle form. Are we doing questions throughout or at the end?
Throughout.
Okay. If you have questions around all of these definitions, please don't stop and ask us. Yeah.
Hi, Cheyenne.
Hi, guys. For the out-of-cycle forms, I just wanted to make the point that there's due dates for those. So those due dates are October 1st and February 1st. We implemented November 1st and March 1st. We did the time frame from SALX. I wanted to add that little.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Cheyenne from the Office of Budgets, by the way.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheyenne. Any other questions regarding all of these? All right, we will move on. So this is our little workflow. The example that we've chosen today is a promotion of an employee. So someone's doing excellent and you want to give them a little bump up. So the first thing you're going to do is either modify or create a new position description for that employee. And so you're going to, and also in your handouts, one of the handouts we have is whether you modify or create new. And so it'll give you a couple of different scenarios as to when you would modify that position description or when you would create a new one. So hopefully that will be helpful. So once you modify or create a new position description, you're going to send it through the TMS approval process. And it's going to come to HR for the classification review. So we're going to review it for the classification, and we're going to approve it and move it through. And we're going to look for three main things. Is it a new or a different position? This can be a create new, which could be a totally new position within the department, or this could also be just a totally new position employee. It may not be new to your department, but it's completely new duties to an employee. So we're going to look and see if it's a new or different. Oh.
I made it different.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Do you want me to just turn it over to you, Drew?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bridget
So
and I are
we'll
going to
go from
go
there.
back and forth.
So as Siobhan was saying, the first type of promotion we're going to talk about is when an employee is moving to a new or different position. For instance, if a coordinator is moving to a new assistant director position, and then that coordinator position is going to be backfilled, so the employee will be performing new and different duties in that assistant director role. This is called a direct hire because you're hiring them directly as opposed to through a national search. The first step in after you modify the position and HR reviews and classifies it, the next step would be submitting an AAR through the talent management system. The AAR, it's blue because OEO reviews it. You'll need to submit the AAR form and provide sufficient rationale as well as supporting documentation. Once OEO reviews and approves the AAR, that's when the employee will go in and apply for the position. And I'm using air quotes because they're not actually applying for the position. They're more like creating a profile that will connect them to the AAR. And once the employee applies for the position, that's when the unit can go in and create the hiring proposal and upload the offer letter to the AAR. And at that point, that's when the employee will be moved into the new position in TMS.
Bridget, can you touch on resumes when the resume gets uploaded? Who does that?
Yes. So when I mentioned supporting documentation as part of the AAR request, that's one of the pieces that the department will need to submit with their AAR in the TMS. They'll need to upload a resume for the proposed individual just to demonstrate that the employee meets the minimum qualifications. Yes? This process is for AP and faculty, yes. Good question. Once all of the TMS approval points have been met, the unit or department will also have to submit an Oracle action for all of the assignment changes to be updated in Oracle as well. We want the systems to match.
So the second thing that HR Clearance and Comps will look at is if it's a change in duties, but it will not change in classification. So say you upgrade the decision-making complexity a little bit, you add some new duties, maybe a new project to the essential job duties, but it's not, so what we're looking for, what we kind of base is a 30% increase in duties, decision-making complexity, anything like that. If we feel like it's less than the 30%, and I know that's kind of objective to everybody, but if it's a little bit of duties but not significant, and it won't change the classification, then we're going to look for that as well.
So in this instance, no AAR is required because even though the duties and responsibilities changed, the classification of the position didn't change. So we won't require an AAR to be submitted through TMS. The department or unit will have to just submit an Oracle action, so all of those assignment changes updated.
And these are just the system changes that we're talking about. Becca will talk about the salary piece of it in just a second. And then the third thing we're going to look for is a change in duties and then change in classification. That would result in a change in classification. That would be above the 30%. That could be an addition of significant supervision, significant decision-making, significant project, program management, essential job duties, all of that. If it is a significant change, then it would change the classification possibly, and then it would result in.
Yes, so this is the next type of AAR. When the changes to a position, the duties and responsibilities change to the point, like Siobhan was saying, that the classification changed. So we use as an example a coordinator position who takes on additional duties so that their position is elevated to an assistant director position with a higher classification. So the employee is still performing the coordinator role, but they're just taking on additional. So it's different than the direct hire because in the direct hire scenario, an employee is actually moving to a new position, whereas in the title change expansion of duties example, the employee is staying in the same role, just that role is expanding or changing. So similar to the direct hire, the unit will have to submit an AAR through the TMS, which includes sufficient rationale and the right supporting documentation, like the resume, which demonstrates that the employee meets the minimum qualifications. Once OEO reviews and approves the AAR, then the employee again can go in and apply for the position, or just create that profile that connects them to the AAR. And then the unit can create that hiring proposal and upload a new offer letter for the employee. That's when the employee will be seated in the new version of their position. And again, an Oracle action will need to also be submitted to update Oracle as well. And this is where we see the bulk of the issues or the hiccups in OEO, because if a unit just modifies a position with HR but doesn't follow through with these blue steps or the AAR process, the promotion isn't actually finalized because the employee doesn't have their new title or the correct work history in TMS. Where this can cause an issue for the department is later on, if you try to make additional changes to the position or try to promote the employee again, it can cause some delays and some confusion later on. So that's TMS and Oracle, and now Becca's going to talk about how salary works with this.
Yes. So, and something to note too is if you have any questions about any of these steps or you're not sure what your action might trigger, if it's going to be a new position, change in duty, classification, all those pieces, certainly reach out to HR for the classification piece and the position description, but please do give us a call. We're happy to talk through scenarios with you and figure out what specifically your situation will result in. So just know we're here for as a resource.
Real quickly, the main question we get in OEO, I forgot to mention this, is distinguishing between what is a direct hire and what is a title change expansion of duties. And like Becca said, please do not hesitate to contact us because it can be a gray area that causes some confusion. So we'll be happy to talk through the scenario with you, understand what's changing about the job, if you'll be backfilling that original position, and kind of provide guidance from there.
Yes, so Kathy has shared that this entire Blue Jeans presentation will be available on the HR website, along with all the handouts that we have today. Okay, So we've kind of talked about the structure of what this looks like in terms of the talent management system related to the position description and a possible alternative appointment request to seat the person in that position, and then the Oracle action. But what if that change in duties and change in position also results in an increase in the salary? That adds a whole other layer of complexity. And so what we're going to do is kind of talk about a couple different scenarios. So in this particular situation, if you have a new or a different position that's going to be created and updated in the talent management system with an alternative appointment request direct hire, and there's a salary that comes along with that, you would not need to submit an off-cycle salary form. Now, I do have this note in here that says not included in SALX, but I want to further clarify that. So if this change happens between July 1 through the end of February, they could be potentially included in SALX because they've been in the job the whole rest of the year. If it is March 1st or after, right now, they would not be included in the salary exercise. They would not be eligible. So can you repeat that?
Sure. I wondered if it was flipped. So can you repeat when it's in the SALX and when it's not?
If it's in the SALX, the person would have been appointed and gone through this entire process July 1st, or even a little bit before that, July 1st through the end of February. Then they would be eligible for the salary exercise process at the university. If the person has gone through this and their new appointment begins March 1st or later, they would not be eligible to be in SALX. So they would have to do the salary piece at a later time. But realistically, the salary is increased through the completion of the hiring proposal that Bridget talked about and the offer letter, and then ultimately the Oracle action. So there wouldn't be these other additional pieces depending upon what time of the year it is and what type of appointment it is. Is that clear as mud? Okay. Okay, so the next scenario that Bridget talked about was the change in duties but does not result in a change in classification. Therefore, there would not be an alternative appointment request, only an Oracle action to finalize the changes. And if the individual is receiving a salary, they would go through either the off-cycle salary adjustment form or the salary exercise process, but depending upon that time of year. Again, they wouldn't need an AAR, but they would need to update their salary. This third category, the change in duties, change of classification, AAR, title change, expanded duties, and they are going to be receiving a salary, it would be either an off-cycle salary adjustment form or through the salary exercise process, again, as we discussed in terms of the timing of the year, and they would need to still complete the hiring proposal, the offer letter, and the Oracle action. And one thing that we get a lot of questions about sometimes is where do we begin? Really timing, what is the key in terms of where do we start? Which process do we use first? We recognize there's 3 different processes. How does this process work? It's always best to start with HR, with the classification and compensation department, to determine what path you're going to be going down, and OEO, have a conversation with us before you make any of these changes, because it could alter where the path you need to take on these. And then if you are going to be including a salary increase with this process, it's best to submit the off-cycle salary adjustment form when you're submitting the AAR. That way the two are timed together so we can see one matches the other. Because as Bridget shared, the challenges can be, if you don't have these pieces aligned, especially if there's the change in duties, change in classification, you've changed it in Oracle, you've had an off-cycle salary adjustment approved, but the person's never actually been seated in the position. It's never actually been finalized. So again, it can be a little bit challenging in terms of timing, but that makes the most sense in terms of creating the position description, submitting the AAR if needed, and then submitting the off-cycle salary adjustment form at that time. Yes. Sure. So would you be hiring them through an AAR, or is it through a search?
Through AAR.
Okay. So one thing to note too is, of course we give you this beautiful presentation that shows how things should ideally work, but every situation is different. So it depends on a variety of things. So is that person in an AP position, state classified, faculty? Are they non-student hourly, or are they a non-student hourly, or are they regular
AP to AP?
Okay.
Yeah, if you have a specific question about an employee, I'd be happy to talk to you after this. Yeah, and go through the questions, because typically we do ask for a little bit more background about why you're choosing to hire in this way before we give a recommendation as to which avenue to take.
Well, thoughts I'd like to insert here. First, I know we're talking about AARs today, but I want to give the cautionary note. AARs are the exception to the rule. So as you share an instance of an AP to an AP, there would be questions about why isn't there a search? Why wouldn't it be a search? But if it's an AAR for an AP to AP, that is something that would be approved through OEO, because there are some very good or extenuating circumstances to merit that. Then if I understand your question correctly, you're asking about the salary. It would be because the person you're intending to fill the position with the AR is vacating a position, right, and filling this position. The salary, it would be a direct hire on that side of the flow chart, and the salary would come about through the offer letter and the proposal. You're able to determine what the appropriate salary is at that point in time as you're hiring someone to fill the role.
Sure. So in addition to the flow chart that we have in our presentation, this is a great resource. It's in your handouts. It's also going to be available electronically. It was created in collaboration with HR and OEO. And it's a matrix that serves as sort of a checklist for you. So over here are the different scenarios, and then over here are the processes that are required for those type of changes. So it's two-sided. This is the second page. If we look at one, for instance, an employee moving to a new position via a direct hire, which we just talked about. The matrix shows that, yes, you'll need to create or modify a new position. You also need an AAR and an Oracle action. So this is a great handy checklist just to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out what processes to use for your specific situation. And then also we have a slide of contacts, who to contact for what. So one big takeaway from this presentation is who you can call or contact for what type of questions. So human resources for AP position descriptions and Oracle questions, OEO for AP and faculty postings, hiring, proposals, and AARs, Office of the Provost for questions related to the off-cycle salary forms, and then the Office of Budgets for SALX.
So there's a few handouts that we provided you. Diana mentioned a few of them. There's also a handout that's titled, When is an AAR required? That can also kind of help in conjunction with the chart that Bridget just shared. And we also have another one, just if you have any questions, and it's related to the talent management system, Nicole in our office created this flow chart to kind of guide you through who would be the person to answer the question based on what particular subject it is that you're going to be asking about. So just know that those resources are available. And we have about 4 minutes for questions.
And as usual, the presentation will be on HR liaison page, and we will also have on the OEO page the flow charts, all the flow charts in the handout and the flow chart in the presentation. We'll have that in the OEO page. And so we didn't preface the presentation, but I heard the question, so I want to clarify. We're talking about AP and faculty positions this morning. State classified, it's about auditing. The PDQ, it's about asking for an in-range salary motion. Both of those actions, the first goes to employment, the second goes to Tracy Hutton in HR. So state classified has different processes to achieve these goals. Any questions at this point?
We'll be available afterwards too if you have a specific scenario you'd like to run through.
So a big thank you to Bridget, Becca, Siobhan, Emily. Emily is the one who prepared the PowerPoint and did all the flow charting, one of the key folks who did it. So thank you all very much for participating today and sharing. So delighted to be able to share. So now we're going to segue to supplemental pay, and delighted to share that Nick is with us this morning, and maybe Libby Chang, who's going to be joining us to talk about supplemental pay, might be very relieved as well that it's a team, not just Libby this morning, but Nick's been a bit under the weather, so thanks, Nick, for being here this morning. So the presentation now is really to show how supplemental pay is working currently, so that there have been some questions, so an opportunity to show just how it works, what the flow chart is. One of the handouts is the flow chart of supplemental pay and the opportunity to ask questions. And know, again, that, pardon me, the feedback that has been coming in is being gathered by information systems and is going to be considered by Bob and Mark and Dan Bush in connection with how the process is working now electronically. Nick, Libby.
Thank you, Diana. I'm going to let Libby drive this,
Okay.
if that's okay with you. Let's make sure that we get the...
Yeah, and I'm going to pull it up now too, as well for the folks on the phone, so you can see the handout we have. No, I'm going to go live. I just want to submit a form.
Is this being shared?
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thanks. So some of the confusion that we've seen so far has to do with exactly how the workflow functions, and it's a combination of fields that are entered directly by the user when they're putting in a supplemental pay request, combination of that and fields that are already populated directly within Oracle. And so things like the hierarchy of departments and the directors of those departments, the chairs and VPs and deans, all of that is in the HR system, and it uses that information, but that some of it is driven by the CSUID numbers of individuals that are entered in, because there's a lot of variation in how this functions across the university in terms of what qualifies as the fiscal officer who's financially responsible for approving at this step, et cetera. And also there's some discussion of delegation that Libby can explain further.
So I'm just bringing up the supplemental pay help documentation now, so we can make sure that the folks on the phone can see our process diagram. I'll just go back to that page real quick. So this is our supplemental pay form, and I just want to let you know that we do have a little help document located right at the top of the form, so just click this link to download help documentation. And also we have our information systems help desk email right there too. So if you run into issues while you're filling out the form, feel free to contact us at that email or the phone number.
And this form and all the other electronic forms that are currently available are linked from the AAR site now. There's a link called electronic forms, and it's listed under that. And it's also been changed on the Provost site now, I believe. And anybody can be a requester for this form. You don't have to have any special role in order to initiate one of these supplemental pay forms, because as you can see, it goes through enough approvals that if you're not supposed to be doing it, you'll be stopped pretty quickly.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at an overview of the process here. Is that large enough for everybody to see? And
zoom in
a little bit more, and hopefully the folks on the phone can see this well too. How's that? All right, so we'll start off with the requester, and then the first approval is going to be the employee supervisor. And then we'll go on for the HR liaison for the employees department. And this we did change from the original form. Originally we were pulling it, but we got lots of feedback that, there was often multiple HR liaisons in a department, perhaps one different for payroll and other areas. So it became evident that we just needed to have a requester choose the HR liaison that it should go to. So we updated the form, and now you can enter in the CSU ID of the appropriate HR liaison.
And the supervisor is hard code. That's on the assignment, the employee's
Yeah,
assignment in the HR system.
So that person, the employee supervisor, then HR liaison is or Oracle IT member?
Nope, actually it's the requester. So the requester will enter in most of the form information. And I'll show you an example of that coming up in a few minutes.
Oracle ID?
The CSU ID.
How would individual know that?
They would have to contact you, possibly, or look it up in Oracle HR. I don't know if there's other methods.
No, it would be a conversation with the HR liaison, and we realize that there's some inconvenience there in having to learn the person's CSU ID, but there's no great way of identifying that person, and there's no great way of having a lookup in the form itself. And so, in order to have a unique way of identifying that person, you have to learn the person's CSU ID and then have it on a sticky note so that you can have it handy when you're entering any of these supplemental pay forms. Yes.
How's that?
That's true. Once you enter the CSU ID, it'll bring up the name, the department.
But is there a lookup for the CSU ID?
There is not a lookup for the CSU
Okay.
ID. So
I didn't populate mine.
the CSU ID?
That may have been your browser actually that has it stored in memory.
Yeah.
If there's a field called CSU ID that is putting in your information.
Yeah.
Although we've had some issues, I will warn against, and I'm not saying that's necessarily what happened in that case, but we've seen some issues in some systems, particularly people admin, of people's browsers auto-populating fields incorrectly. And so I would say that if something is auto-populated, just double check it, because we've seen some very odd things in our systems where browsers are now more aggressively auto-populating fields, and it's not always right.
A reminder to please repeat the questions so that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So that comment that was made for those on the phone was about CSU ID already being populated in the form when they pulled it up, but that there isn't an actual lookup within the form, and so that may have been a browser, something stored in the browser. Yes.
It won't stop it at that point. It will route to that HR person, and they'll get an email notification. Hopefully that HR person would review it and realize, hey, I'm not the one who should be signing off on this, and they'll reject the form.
That question for those on the phone was, what if the person puts in the CSU ID number of an HR liaison at a different department, not the department of the employee, and that could be problematic. People who are filling out these supplemental pay forms do have to be aware of the routing and who it needs to actually go to.
Let me switch back here real quick to the form, just so you can see an example, if anybody hasn't filled out a form yet, of what we're talking about, like with the auto-population fields. So this is the supplemental pay form, and it looks like it's, can everybody see that okay? I'm going to enter in my CSU ID as an example. So the first field is business officer or administrator who will certify that funds are available. Obviously, I would not be the person certifying that funds are available, but just for today's demo, I'm going to just use my CSU ID for all fields. I don't want to share anybody's information publicly without their permission. So I can enter in my CSU ID here. Is that in right? And then I'll hit Tab or Enter. And you can see it auto-populated my name. So this is where you can check, okay, did I type in the number right? Did I get the correct certifier of available funds? You can double check the name. And then I will enter my CSU ID again as the employee receiving supplemental pay. So you should only have to enter their CSU ID and it'll pull up the rest of their information. So you can see that it pulled up my information, it pulled up my email, it pulled up my Oracle ID there, and my department number and department name, and then it pulled up my supervisor and the department head. So that's all information that you won't have to type in. But it is good to double check it. We have had a few cases where they said like, oh, this department head has retired. It's not the correct one. In that case, they have to get it updated through HR because we're pulling from the HR system of record.
And so if you do need to make corrections, this is part of the annual audit now, is checking who we have in the system as the department chair or head, director, what have you. But if you need to make any changes to that throughout the year, please contact HRIS because this is starting to drive certain automation, not only this one, but other forms that are upcoming. Yes? I don't know the HR process for that, whether they get temporarily updated. We can easily put somebody in there on a temporary basis.
But also from just the technical standpoint for form routing, you can contact the Information Systems Help Desk at that contact information I showed you at the top of this form and let us know that that department head is going to be out and who the substitute department head who should be approving for him is, and then we can reroute those forms on a temporary basis. And here's where I was talking about before with the HR liaison of the employee's home department. So I'll enter in the CSU ID there. And you do have to know the CSU ID, but I mean, that's the same for the paper form, right? You still had to know who to enter in and who to route the form to.
Or they were asking, what was the last question?
Oh, sorry. The last question was, what if the department head goes on sabbatical? And so the answer was either a temporary update in the HR system or contact Information Systems Help Desk, and we can temporarily reroute the forms that they should approve. But we do have to know the authorized approver. I mean, you can't just contact Information Systems and have us reroute a form. We do check that it gets rerouted to the right person. And then you can enter in the paying department number. I'm going to just enter in my own department number. The paying department is the same as my home department in this case. And that information is auto-populated as well. And I have this question here, is the employee's home department the same as the paying department? And that's yes, and that's just for routing purposes. That way, we don't send it to the department head twice. In some cases, the form will go to an approver twice, like say somebody is the employee's direct supervisor and they're also the VP of the department. It might come to them twice because it's a different role that they're approving for. The supplemental pay type. I'll choose teaching just temporarily here because I want to show you that on the form we have popped up the space where you can enter in the course numbers and sections for any supplemental pay for teaching. These fields here are expandable. If you need more room, you just click on the corner and drag and drop the box. but I'm going to choose professional services, and I'm just going to, here you can enter in the description of what the supplemental pay is for. Just going to make it easy on myself and put tests. But if you have additional information, a lot of times with the paper form, there were attachments. You can do those here as well. You can just go down to this, choose a file and upload like a PDF or Word document with the justification for supplemental pay. If you select choose, it just brings up your file selector so you can just select whatever is on your desktop. Now click next. And we do have checks for required fields. Here you can see I forgot to put the date in, so it won't let you move the form along if you don't fill out a required field. Now I'll click next, and all my fields should be filled in. And so then we're asked to fill in our start and end dates. I'm just going to pick today's date for testing purposes. This would, of course, be the start and end of the work for the supplemental pay. You can see the employee appointment type. I'm automatically filled in because I'm a regular 12-month salary. This will be filled in, populated, whether it's student hourly or non-student hourly or 9 months. You do have to select the FTE, full-time or part-time. If you select part-time, you have an option for entering the part-time percent. But I'm full-time. Status, you can see is auto-populated as well. I'm an administrative professional. And then you have another box that you can enter in any additional information as needed. Here you can see the salary is auto-populated, as well as the supplemental pay paid this fiscal year, so not including this assignment. And that supplemental pay has actually been processed by HR payroll and has actually been paid. So you might be asking, well, what about supplemental pay that I know of that's already in process? How do I handle that? That is handled by this pending supplemental pay field here. So any supplemental pay that you know of that's in the works that hasn't actually been paid out yet, you can enter in here, and as well as the supplemental pay to be paid for this assignment. So I'm going to enter in some examples here and try and trigger. This is all for the calculation for the yearly supplemental pay amount check. Like if it's over a certain amount, it requires special approval by the provost's office or the president's office, depending on how the departments report, usually the provost. So I'm going to try and trigger that. There. So now you can see that as you're entering supplemental pay, if it's over that amount, it'll be flagged for you and subsequent approvers that, oh, this form exceeds the approved amount of supplemental pay within a year. This is going to require a little extra scrutiny.
Tim?
Earlier you had whether full-time or part-time.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I can think of part-time, because I thought you only did supplemental pay if they were full-time, is maybe if they're part-time in 2 different departments and it adds up to full-time. Is that why you have part-time? I was under the impression you only did it if they're already working 40 hours. Otherwise, you could hire them as a non-student for however many hours you need it for.
The question for those on the phone is whether or not, if that part-time flag is only for people who are have multiple assignments, and does supplemental pay only apply to people who are full-time? I don't believe that's the case. At least that's not my. Does anybody have any information on that?
We were always told.
But supplemental pay is for.
I'm just saying, years ago, that's what we were told to do.
Linda? It's an it depends? Okay.
It depends. So let's talk about some of the depends, and specific ones might require further inquiry, but it also depends if the employee is exempt or non-exempt, because if the employee is non-exempt, we need to be careful about overtime. So if the additional supplemental pay work would take the person overtime, then we need to calculate what that overtime would be and ensure that the person is receiving the appropriate pay. It also can depend as to whether the work is happening in the same unit or not the same unit. If it's an exempt employee and the work is happening for a different unit, it could be supplemental pay, even though it's less than 40 hours. So it really does depend on the situation. If you have a specific concern, can you contact us and we can talk through it and understand what the approach should be. For non-exempt employees, if it's within the same unit or if it's work in two units that the person does do work in, what we ask is that there is coordination between the units. We want to ensure that any overtime is covered. And that's a part of the conversation that we do have, particularly in connection with some of our state classified employees who receive supplemental pay in some pretty routine instances. We want to be sure that if there's overtime, the overtime is getting covered.
For the people on the phone, the question is, would it be possible when the form brings up the employee information to show whether they are exempt or non-exempt? That might be
that's potentially possible, yeah. If that would be helpful. We could talk about that as an enhancement.
If we have confusion about whether there should be supplemental pay or not, who's the best contact? What area? HR payroll, HRIS? I mean, who should we reach out to first?
You could contact HR payroll, and Jacqueline, can I call you out? You could contact Jacqueline and HR payroll. You could contact me, you could contact Tracy Hunt. So Jacqueline, so the question is who to contact if there is a desire to figure out supplemental pay. And the answer was myself, Diana, Jacqueline in payroll, Tracy Hutton, and Jacqueline also shared from the back of the room a reminder that supplemental pay is owned by the provost office, and they would have final say. If you have questions about a partial FTE, what we were just talking about, certainly feel free to contact HR and we can help you walk through that.
Start with you and then roll to next.
All right, here you can enter in the account numbers from which supplemental pay will be paid, and then the amount. I'm just entering in test data here so you can see the form, see an example entry. If you enter an account that begins with 53, that will trigger an approval routing to sponsored programs, so they can look at anything coming from a 53 account.
I will say sponsored pay is not a good thing. More than likely will be not. You have a new program.
For those on the phone, Dave Schmidt is here from the Office of Sponsored Programs to remind us that, in general, supplemental pay is not allowed on 5-3 accounts, although there are very few exceptions. For now. Okay.
And next is how shall the supplemental pay be paid? Monthly until assignment is complete. That's the regular one for my department. Lump sum at end of assignment or other. And I'll just stick with the monthly until assignment is complete. And then here, this was a recent change we made based on feedback. This section used to say certification of funds use only, which was very confusing. So just yesterday, this update went through to require additional approval from the paying department's dean, VP, or delegate. The certifier of available funds can enter the approver's CSU ID in the field below. And we did this field because some departments, for them, department head was enough of a sign-off. And Dan Bush agreed with this. Department head was all that was needed. But other departments wanted sign-off from their dean or VP or their dean or VP's delegate. So we entered in this optional field to be flexible for both paths of approval. Question?
Occasionally we'll have other.
That, I think, I just noticed that it popped up really slow, so I'm wondering if we have a slow network connection in this room. Usually there is a box that pops up where you can enter in the other explanation. So when I go back to my desk, I need to check this out because, and make sure it is the slow connection in the room. Otherwise, I have to send a bug report to our NG Web Solutions that we're partnering with to create this form.
And can I just add a clarification here? So this is not something that the requester fills out, right? This is when it gets to the certifier of funds stage that they would be able to fill this out. But one of the things that we've seen a few times now is that the certifier of funds sometimes just sees this and enters their CSU ID and name in this, and then it comes right back to them because this is supposed to be the paying department's dean or delegate, right? And so there's been some confusion with it coming back to the certifier of funds at this step, and that's because it's slightly confusing how if you're not reading carefully. So just a note of caution there.
Yeah, and that's why we improved it because it really was confusing before. So I hope the labeling
clearer
makes
now how
it
it's worded.
Clearer. Here's the other box where you can enter in the other information, like half at start and half at finish. This, you can see I can't type in here. I'm clicking in here, but it's disabled. And that's just exactly why Nick said, is because this can only be entered in at that certification of funds step.
Yes. The question is, can this delegate listed here be the assistant, or does it have to be at a certain level in order to be that delegate? Not to my knowledge. I think that it can frequently be an assistant.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say no. And the reason I say that is because I signed supplemental pay for state classified at the end. And in conversations when we were revising the supplemental pay form a couple of years ago, the deans and the VPs, it's got to be a dean or a VP. What can be delegated is, for example, an associate dean that may have some operational role in that dean's office. But it really has been a dean, a VP, or another officer level position.
Yes. That's right. So for the people on the phone, the question is, when does this box open up? And this box for entering in that dean, VP, or delegate will open up on the certification of available funds step. Whoever in your department, whether it's the business officer or there's an administrator, whoever receives that email notification that they're part of the form, their approval is required, so they can go and they can check that funds are available and certify those funds are available. This box will open, and they can also enter in this additional approval. Yes?
I'm just wondering if there's been any conversations about the ability more than one line at a time instead of it going back and forth. So I think I'm in a similar situation with some folks where I am the initiator, HR liaison, and the certifier of funds, and my department head is frequently the supervisor as well. So I've initiated about 10 documents. Each time we get to play a game of hot potato, 5 times before it actually goes out to the world past the two of us. Then I go, he goes, I go, he goes, I go, then it goes out. Are there any conversations about making it available to not do that?
No, this is actually the first time I've received that feedback, so that's good to know. That will have to be a discussion with the Dan Bush, who owns the process, on how he wants to handle role-based approval. I'm not sure what the university's policy is on that. I've worked in other regulated industry where each time there's a role-based approval, the person has to sign it. So I'll find out how much flexibility is there. Yes?
How does it know? Go to
How is the certifier of funds defined? So that is one of the fields that's entered by the requester at the beginning. So
Yeah, that
with
was
the
on the
with the
previous
CSU ID.
page.
Because again, it varies so much from department to department and situation to situation. We can't house all of this information in the HR system and keep it up to date.
Right, and then likewise, how we were talking about this section of the form, whoops, okay, there, it did go back to the previous page where this is where the business officer or administrator who will certify that funds are available. So this is where it pulls that approver from. And so then we got one last field to discuss here, and this section is for HR use for state classified employees only. So we'll go back to the workflow in a minute here, and you can see all the approvals are required. This, I can't upload any files here because this is disabled on the requester. This is not in my section. So this is an optional field that if the people in HR who review the state classified employees would like to upload further documentation, they have that option here, which is only available on their step of the form process. All right, let's go back and look at the approval process here again, and we'll walk through the entire process, having seen the form. So, as you saw, the requester initiates the form and they enter in almost all of the required information, with the exception of the person who certifies that funds are available. They'll enter in that optional approval for a dean, VP, or delegate, and then there's some additional HR sign-off too. So then it goes to the employee supervisor. The employee supervisor can't edit the form. It's just their job to review it and say, yes, I'm aware of this supplemental pay. It looks good. I approve. So they just electronically sign and move the form along the way. And each step in the approval process, the person whose job is to approve will receive an email notification. Some of you have probably already gotten the emails. You'll get a nice email saying like, hello, this is a supplemental pay form for so-and-so. Please approve as the employee supervisor. And then the person, the requester, will receive a confirmation email at each step in the process. And we debated on, is this going to be too many emails? But we decided to err for now on giving too much information rather than too little. So you'll receive an email every step in the process, so you'll know exactly where it's at. Like, oh, okay, the employee supervisor has just signed off, and now it's routed to the HR liaison for the employees department. And obviously, if you're the requester and the HR liaison, it's a little redundant. But for those who are playing different roles, it can provide needed information. So after it goes to the employee supervisor, it goes to the HR liaison in the employees department. And then we reach this decision tree here. Is the employee department different from the paying department? If yes, it needs to go off to the paying department. If not, of course, it's within the same department, so they already know about it. So let's say yes, the employees department is different than the paying department. So it'll go to the employees department head. Or unit head. After the employees department unit head signs off, indicating that they're aware of the supplemental pay and it's okay with them, then it goes to the certification of funds. And so then the person who oversees the accounts will sign off that, yes, there are funds available to pay the supplemental pay. And they'll also be able to enter in that field for an additional dean, VP, or delegate approval. If that's all been approved, it'll go to the paying department head. And then once they sign off, it goes through several different decisions and gets routed based on circumstances. So is that dean, VP, or delegate required? If so, it'll be routed to them for their approval. If not, it'll go straight down to the next check, is the paying account a 53 account? We touched on this earlier. If it is, it'll go to sponsored programs. And then it'll go to, is the employee state classified? Yes, then it'll go to the assistant chief HR officer, and then on to Diana. And then it goes to the employee for their review, just to make sure everything is correct and meets their understanding. After that, it goes to the provost and president's or president's office, depending on the reporting structure of the department. So if the department is like, I think CSU Police Department reports directly to the president, it would go straight to him and it would skip Dan Bush's approval. But most departments in the university go to Dan Bush and not the president. And then on to HR payroll for actual implementation. And then at each step in the process, if people need a copy for their records, they can go in and download a copy of the form. In fact, I can show you that quick. Many of you have probably already been in here, but for those of you who haven't, this is just on the Information Systems main page. We have direct links to view your pending forms or your forms history. I'll just go in here and view some pending forms. And you see I have quite a list of test forms here. So we do have filters at the top. Like here, like I can show forms that I need to complete. And I can take a PDF. Okay.
Can you talk about rejection?
Yes. Yeah. Let's see. Let me open up one of these test forms. Hopefully this one is in progress. We've got a question on how to reject a form. So way down at the bottom of the form here, if you're an approver, you log in, you review the form, something is not as you see fit, you can just click this reject button at the bottom of the form and reject it. This will allow you to enter in a subject, why it's rejected, and then comments, like not enough justification provided, or whatever. And then this will get sent off. We have had a lot of feedback that unfortunately the rejection process only rejects to the previous approver. The company that we're working with says that they want it that way, so each approver in the step is notified that the form has been rejected, but we do have an enhancement request into them to allow us to reject back to the requester, who's the person who can actually edit the form, because that would just make our process so much more efficient. But we haven't heard a timeline of when they're going to implement that, so I'll keep you guys posted.
You mean the requester at this point won't get an email?
The requester won't get an email at this point. The previous approver did. So let's say I'm the paying department head and I reject this email back. It'll go back to the certification of funds step. So what I've been having people do is in these comments here, you have to write in sometimes you only want to go to the previous step because, you know, that's where the correction needs to be made. But oftentimes you'll add in the comments, please reject this back so it gets to the requester. This part of the form is incorrect. Yes?
The wrong HR liaison. That person rejected.
It depends where it's at in the process. So right here, like if I'm the paying department head, it's gone past the HR liaison. Oh, sorry, for the people on the phone, the question was if at this point in the process it was discovered that the HR liaison is incorrect, can the form be rejected or can the HR liaison just be edited right now? And unfortunately, you have to reject back to the requester who enters in the HR liaison. But we are working on getting that improved.
I'm noticing that we're over and happy to stay and answer any questions you may have. But please join me in thanking Nick, but particularly Libby, for being here and walking us through the form. Thank you very much. And happy to take any additional questions, but I know we've run over, and so I want to respect your time. Thanks for coming today, and good luck this afternoon. Be careful getting home.